Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Rivet Power Hour. We're going to give folks just a minute or two to get logged on. And I was going to ask folks a poll question, but it looks like my polls are not appearing today. So no polls today, actually. We'll just give folks another couple seconds to join us.
Hey, Claire, I can see it.
Oh, great.
Since
You
I'm
can
on
see.
hold, yeah, I can launch. Want me to do the first, what is your role one?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
If folks can just fill that out for us. We're always curious about who's joining us for these power hours. And if folks are logging on, if you can just complete that role question for us so we can see who is on the call with us today. All right. So it looks like we have some providers and state leaders with us today, which is great. All right. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today on our Rivet Education Power Hour. We're really excited today to be talking about our investigation of the Professional Learning Partner Guide rubric. It's a really apt topic for this month because we've just launched another application cycle. Believe it or not, application cycle 9. So we've just launched the application cycle for this fall. So it's great really to be digging into the application rubric, which is really what underpins the Professional Learning Partner Guide and our evaluation process. And it's what enables us to feel confident that our users can trust that the providers that are in the PLPG can deliver on that promise of excellent curriculum-based professional learning. So we're very excited to talk about our reflection on that, our evaluation of that, and what we learned. So let's see here. Let's talk about a few just pieces of housekeeping, which is that these are very informal discussions. If you've been with us previously, you feel free to ask questions at any point throughout the discussion. You can use the Q&A feature for this, and we'll jump in if there's a pause in the conversation where we can discuss that as a group. And you can also use the chat to share any ahas, wonderings, or things that resonate with you. So Jocelyn, could you help me out again with the poll? I know you tried to educate me on where to find that, but can you ask this one more poll question here about the number of power hours you've attended previously? We're curious if folks are newer to us. Okay, I see some new, some new-ish, some experienced. All right. Yeah, that's great. Seems like we have a very even mix here. Excellent. Okay. So I'd like to introduce our hosts for today. We have with us Jocelyn Richardson. She's our Professional Learning Partner Guide Manager, and she manages the day-to-day for the Professional Learning Partner Guide, our application cycles, the management of partners, and also this, for our team, she was the leader of this evaluation process. And she has more than 15 years of very unique experiences in education, everything from teacher, math specialist, coach, curriculum writer. You've taught abroad, you've taught here. Jocelyn's done it all. So she's seen a wide array of educational experiences, and she brings that experience to her work with the Professional Learning Partner Guide. We were hoping to have Mel with us from NIRN today, but unfortunately she has probably what everybody has, it seems, this week. So she's unwell and unable to join us today, but we are excited to welcome Karen Ward, who is the Director of Implementation Science, Research, and Practice the Research and Practice program at RTI International. And she also has more than 15 years of experience in implementation and scaling of evidence-based practices in K-12 education. And most recently, her work has been focused on applied implementation practice and on outcomes for students who have traditionally been disadvantaged in our educational system, students experiencing poverty, Black and Latinx students, English learners, and students with disabilities. And with that, I think I'm going to pass it over to you, Karen, to continue our discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Claire, for that wonderful introduction and starting us off. We're excited to be here. This has been a collaboration between NIRN and Rivet for the last 2 years. Annie, I think it might almost be 3 at this point. We had the opportunity to be brought together for our shared love of ensuring that teachers have access to high quality instructional materials and they have high quality curriculum-based professional learning to support their use of that within a coherent instructional system to ultimately get to those improved outcomes that we're wanting for our students. So it's been a wonderful collaboration the past several years, and we look forward to the more work that's coming in our work together. But today we're going to share a little bit, as Claire said, and highlight some of our few learnings together thus far. So let's get into what do we hope to, what do we hope to go over today with you all? We would like to share the steps that we are collaboratively taking together to establish the strength of the PLPG rubric to evaluate professional learning services. This is a key tool for the Rivet team, and we're hoping to share with you what have been our key learnings and what have we done as a result of those key learnings, what actions has been taken using them as we go forward, and highlight what's coming next in our collaboration together. So to get us started, we just wanted to have you all think about, kind of prime our brains for this conversation, and have you share in the chat if you'll be willing to engage with us. Why is it important to you to evaluate the quality of professional learning? We'll give you a minute to think. So Jocelyn, I know for me, when I was a district administrator back in the day, now I'm gonna like date myself. This was a good over 10 years now, but it was really important for me as a district leader to evaluate the quality of the professional learning that our teachers were receiving, because I needed to know whether or not it was a good investment of our funds. And that how we were using, whether or not teacher skills and knowledge were developing and were they feeling more confident in being able to use the curriculum materials that were in front of them. And ultimately, was it improving their practice and the outcomes for students as we were going forward. If I didn't know if our professional learning was achieving those goals, I wasn't sure if I'd wanted to continue to invest in the professional learning or if I needed to put the money elsewhere. And so that we were good, publicly funded, was in a public school system. So wanted to make sure our tax dollars money were being appropriately used, right? As consumers of that and as a parent of 2 children that were in the district as well at that time. So if you're busy, maybe this is your lunch hour, you're busy eating, keep eating or keep engaging, and we're going to keep moving here. All right. So with that, Jocelyn's going to set the stage for us and sharing what is the PLPG, what is the rubric that's used, and how was that developed before we get into what was our key learnings. So Jocelyn, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Karen. As Claire shared, I'm the manager of the Professional Learning Partner Guide. A little bit about the guide. The Professional Learning Partner Guide, I'm going to drop that link in the chat, is a free online tool that offers comprehensive and objective analysis of professional learning providers. Using the website, users can connect with professional learning providers who meet their particular needs. And so we wanted to create a place where district leaders could come to find resources for supporting the implementation and use of high quality instructional materials. Because we know that all too often districts don't have the time or capacity to support implementation on their own, to know all of the steps that they should be looking for and taking. And so, excuse me, at Rivet, that is a lot of what our work is composed of. And so the PLPG measures and showcases professional learning providers who have embedded against our framework, which I'll talk about in a second, for curriculum-based professional learning. These providers have proven that they have the expertise to support with implementation. And the first PLPG was launched in August 2020, and we are now on our 9th review cycle. And we currently showcase about 50 providers and cover about roughly 80% of the green high quality curricula from Ed Reports. And I apologize because I was supposed to advance the slide. This is just a preview of the PL partner guide. And so I just want to talk a little bit about professional learning instruction and HQIM, and I'm going to drop our framework in the chat as well. Okay, sorry, it's frozen. So our definition of curriculum-based professional learning is that it supports and strengthens instruction using high-quality instructional materials. It is uniquely powerful, connecting content knowledge and instructional strategies to the HQIM that teachers use daily. CBPL goes beyond the initial product training of HQIM to provide teachers and leaders with the ongoing job-embedded dynamic support that they need to use their HQIM skillfully. And as we mentioned, our providers are vetted against their ability to provide curriculum-based professional learning. So to talk a little bit about our framework, you can see our framework is a pyramid. And at the bottom of the pyramid, we have the characteristics of professional learning that should be present in all 4 types of professional learning. This framework was informed by the latest research in professional learning. And the next level of the framework talks about the different types, adoption of professional learning, adoption, initial implementation, ongoing implementation for teachers, and ongoing implementation support for leaders. And then finally, at the top of the pyramid, we call these the professional learning structures. So these structures can be leveraged to provide educators with the professional learning that they want and need. So our application process for providers have to apply and advance through 3 gateways in order to be approved for the PLPG. In gateway 1, we look at, can the provider demonstrate an expertise in HQIM and or content? So providers can apply for HQIM expertise, and they can also apply for adoption or content expertise. And we define HQIM as that curricula that meets expectations on Ed Reports, so the green curricula. In Gateway 2, we're looking at, can the provider demonstrate that the approach and the design of their professional learning services are likely to meet the intended outcomes? So Karen talked a little bit about that earlier. Is their PL actually getting the helping us meet our goals, helping you meet your goals as a district? Are students learning? Are teachers learning? Is their knowledge and their skills being changed over the course of the professional learning? And so during Gateway 2, providers apply to 4 different types. So I talked about ongoing for teachers, ongoing for leaders, initial implementation, and launch. And then finally in Gateway 3, we're looking at, can the provider demonstrate that they measure results and use data to drive improvement in their services internally? So next, I want to talk about the PLPG rubric, which was the focus of this project, and I will drop it in the chat. So the providers in our guide are evaluated through strict standards. And so we use this PLPG rubric, and the providers use it to craft their applications, and our reviewers use it to score providers. In the fall of last year, we started the validity study with NIRN. And with the study, we are seeking to strengthen the validity and content in the PLPG rubric. Before I pass it to Karen from NIRN, I just want to pause for any questions that you may have about the PLPG. You can post them in the chat. And as we continue on, if you think of one while she's talking, feel free to post them as well. Any questions before we move on to the study? All right, so you all have time to do that as we advance through the meeting. But Karen, I will go ahead and pass it to you.
Great. Thank you so very much, Jocelyn, for that overview of what the PLPG is and how you all, the purpose of the rubric and how that rubric is used. As I said at the beginning, we engaged in a collaboration with the Rivet team to look at how do we validate the PLG rubric so that way we can feel confident in the results that it produces. And so we had a number of questions that we were seeking to answer within that validation research. First and foremost, we wanted to ensure that the rubric is measuring the needed aspects of quality curriculum-based professional learning. So you saw that Jocelyn put up the triangle of their framework and their definition of curriculum-based professional learning. Does the rubric adequately capture those components? Are there additional components that it should be measuring to look at the quality of professional learning? So that's one question that we were seeking to answer. Another question is, when folks use the rubric, are those raters, are the results consistent across different raters? So that way we can feel confident whether you have fantastic rater 1 or the awesome rater number 2, the results will be consistent across them as they review applications using the rubric to be on the PLPG. And then we wanted to look at the strength of the rubric structure. For example, how strong is it? Do the items that we think hang together to form those gateways or the different types of professional learning, do they hang together as they're supposed to, right, in the data? So for example, do the adoption indicators hang together versus the launch indicators? So those were the 3 questions that we're striving to answer through this validation research. The first phase of the research focused on answering, does the PLPG rubric measure the needed aspects of the quality curriculum-based professional learning? We refer to this, if you like to geek out on research, as the content validity, right? Is it measuring the right content that we want it to be measuring? How did we do that? Well, we used a mixed methods approach. We had several folks complete surveys, and we did focus groups to help provide us greater insight to the results of the surveys. Who engaged in the surveys in the focus group? Well, we went to the target audience. We went to consumers of professional learning. So we had district leaders and state leaders, as well as instructional staff participate. We also had professional learning providers themselves participate in that process from numerous different organizations nationally. And we also had several researchers who specialize in researching high quality professional learning and what are the components of that. So we had you can see our representation there in both the surveys and the focus groups. Some of you on the call may have been one of our participants, and so we thank you. And specifically, the areas that we examined fell in 3 buckets. The first bucket was the administration process, right? So looking at how often do PL providers apply to be on the PLPG and to use the rubric and that to evaluate how often do we do that, and overall satisfaction with that administration process. We also looked at the relevance, the clarity, and the alignment of the specific constructs of high quality professional learning that were being measured, as well as then the specific indicators. So for example, in Gateway 1, looking at the content knowledge of the curriculums. In Gateway 2, looking at the practices of how do you launch launch a curriculum and that professional learning to the ongoing support, for example. And then we also looked at the scoring of the rubric. So for example, we looked at its comprehensiveness of the scoring rubric itself, the weighting that was being used of different items and different components of the rubric, as well as the evidence sources that were being used to validate the scoring as we go forward. So those is the 3 areas that we examined. Before I go further, just wanted to give you another chance to think for a moment. I asked you in the beginning as to why is evaluating professional learning important. Now I just want to give you a moment to think about, how do you evaluate your professional learning services? Do you use a rubric such as the PLPG? Do you do surveys? Do you do focus groups? Is there other type of data that you all collect? So I'll give you a moment to think about that. Jocelyn, while folks are thinking, did you have a favorite practice that you engaged in for evaluating professional learning in previous roles before coming to Rivet?
Yeah, well, in my previous role, I felt like there are some things that we could have done to strengthen our evaluation process. So one of the things we did do is the feedback surveys at the end of a coaching partnership, or at the end of my mind's wrong, at the end of a PD session. So there are some definitely, definitely some more things that we could have done,
Mhm.
as well. We were newer. So, but yeah, those are 2 that were helpful, but I definitely could have strengthened the data that we got
Yeah.
by doing some more things.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Jocelyn. We did survey when I was in the district. We did surveys as well. And then another data source that we used was looking at our walkthrough observations that were being done after trainings. Do you know what I mean? To see like how well teachers were using, engaging in the application of the practice, to see how we could better support in the follow-up of the professional learning that was provided, and within the ongoing, within their professional learning communities that we were supporting as well. All right, so let's dive into what we learned. Thank you for thinking there for a moment with us around how you evaluate your professional learning. So what did we learn and what actions did we take? Well, here is the short answer, right? And I think we can all celebrate this. Does the PLPG rubric measure the needed aspects of quality curriculum-based professional learning? Yes, that is the overwhelming answer, was yes, when we looked at both the survey results and the focus group results. However, we also did find some good insights that we were able to use to support that the Rivet team used in making some changes to the rubric. So let's dive into what those are. So we're going to focus on our top 5 learnings. So first, around the administration process, we heard loud and clearly that a grandfather clause was needed for applicants to not have to reapply as a result of external changes that were impacting the scoring. So for example, we now have a new version of the rubric. If that was done because of this research, that does not necessarily mean that the PL providers would have to reapply, as an example. So there was a grandfather clause created, and the frequency to which the administration process was maintained, we didn't change, that was not changed. We then had a bucket of items around looking at the relevant, the clarity, and the alignment. So we did a key learning around this was that several of the gateways and their indicators were revised to provide greater clarity and greater specificity. For example, we want it to be, feedback was given that we need to be more specific as who was the target audience within that indicator. Was it administrators or leaders, or was it teachers or other instructional staff, or was it both, right? So target audience being greater specificity there, and at what level of the system. We did as well. We also revised in the indicators, or Rivet revised the indicators based on the findings to ensure that the student perspective was centered, and really looking at how equity was being centered within the indicators and being at the forefront of the rubric to support that high quality professional learning. So those were 3 of our top 5 learnings. The other 2 was we added 2 indicators. So we wanted to, based on the data, there was a need to add evaluating, coaching, and ongoing support for teachers. Really looking at how that was being evaluated and how that data was being used for improvement, and which also related to the other indicator that was added in Gateway 3. I'm not going to say the gateway because Jocelyn, I don't want to misspeak. But we added an indicator around how did we use data for ongoing support for leaders. Gateway 3, right, Jocelyn? Or was
Gateway
that
2.
Gateway 2, the 4th type, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Always mix those in my head. So thank you for correcting me there.
Mhm.
So we added 2 indicators. And then finally, I think this was one of the biggest changes, Jocelyn, that came out of the research and the learnings was the indicators previously were weighted differently, right? Some were weighted more heavily than others. And so, based on the learnings and looking at the research, Rivet made the decision using that data to ensure that all indicators were scored consistently on the same scale of a 0, not yet, to a 1, partially, to fully, and that they were weighted equally. And then they also made sure that within those scoring criteria that we included quality as well as the presence or absence of the set of criteria consistently. So that was a big shift along with some of the others and a key learning as we went forward. But I think that shift in the scoring, Jocelyn, helps streamline things too as we go forward. Just highlighting here on the screen briefly some more specific learnings and actions. I'm not going to go through every bullet point here. I think one that I would highlight here is a glossary was also added to really make sure there was clarity on the definition of the terms and that a common language was established between those that were applying for the PLPG, those using the PLPG, so that we were referring to the same thing, right? We know that professional learning can mean things differently in different places, for example, and some other pieces. Let's see. We also revised the types of the professional learning in Gateway 2 to provide, that greater clarity as we went forward. All right. Some other key learnings here, just some quick actions. I talked about the 2 indicators. We really further defined the purpose of Gateway 3 and using different types of data. Some of the indicators, we made sure that all were written to be stated positively as well, for example. And then the scoring, I highlighted these key learnings and the actions taken as well about using consistency in the same scale. All right. So what did all this result in? As you probably have heard Jocelyn reference in the beginning, and as I'm saying, the learnings resulted in a new version of the Professional Learning Partner Guide rubric. So that is now available on the fantastic Rivet website. You can dive in, you can look at more specifics of the gateways and the indicators as they go forward. Jocelyn, anything you would add here to highlight?
Yeah, the glossary on the main page, make sure you check that out. Just more questions, the frequently asked questions about the process are on the main page. Take a look at the submission requirements, which have the specific questions that applicants are asked as they go throughout the process. There's a printable version of the rubric. So there's lots to dig into if you really want to get into know what providers are evaluated on, or if you are a potential provider, that would like to apply for cycle 9, which we're currently in, and Gateway 1 closes October 1st. Feel free to look through that, and you can send me an email, which my information is at the end of the slide if you're interested or you want to meet. But yeah, just kind of go through everything and look to see it. If you're familiar with our previous platform, look at the changes and things like that.
Thank you, Jocelyn. We can also just take a quick pause here. If there's any questions about any of those results, feel free to drop those in the chat and we'll make sure we're monitoring and answering those. Okay. Jocelyn, I always need to work on my wait time.
Yeah, I have really good wait time. So I can wait forever. I know people with different types of processors. So
yeah,
from my classroom days.
From your classroom day, see, that was always an area of improvement for me that I would get as feedback.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this last section, we kind of wanted to go back to the why and highlight for you what's coming next, because this was just the first phase of the validation research of the rubric. We asked you in our starting question and kind of prime our thinking was about why it's important to evaluate the quality of professional learning. Now we're going to ask you to think about, based on what you heard about the PLPG rubric and our learnings together, how would you change how you evaluate the provision of professional learning? What changes would you make and why? And we want to end with talking a little bit about how you can use the PLPG and its rubric within your work. So if you have any thoughts about that you would like to share. So Jocelyn, when I think back to how I would have changed, I think we needed, what I really liked within the PLPG rubric that caught my attention was the two sections really focused on that ongoing support for teachers and the use of data, right, to make those improvements. I think if I were to complete that PLG rubric now, based on my former district days, I think those would be two areas that would get highlighted as needing significant areas of strengthening for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to mention that earlier. If you are in a district and you are looking to strengthen your evaluation or your PD, your PL, the rubric is a good way to kind of see what, some areas that you can lean into. We also have our diagnostic to, determine whether or not what's going on with your professional learning, areas of strength, areas of growth that we have as well. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about that. But yeah, that absolutely the new coaching indicator and the new data indicator and ongoing for teachers or for leaders is really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. All right. Well, Jocelyn, let's wrap up here and talking about how we can use the PLPG. So we can use the PLPG in several different ways, depending on who you are, right? As Jocelyn was just talking about. So if you are a professional learning provider, you can use this rubric to assess and address gaps in your PL offerings. And you can also use the rubric to guide which artifacts to submit as part of your application to Rivet for being on the Professional Learning Partner Guide. Those are just two ways that you could use the rubric to inform your work. As a state education agency personnel member, as an SEA staff member, you could promote the use of the PLPG to schools and districts as a tool for finding providers of HQPL aligned, high quality professional learning aligned to high quality instructional materials. So you could use this tool in support of helping districts locate those high quality professional learning providers. You may also look at it to evaluate your own offerings that the State Department of Ed may be directly offering as well. I know many state departments of ed have funded numerous technical assistance centers or have regional agencies, for example, that they're working with to support their districts and schools. And so, how could this tool be a tool that's used in collaboration together with your own professional learning providers? And then finally, school and district personnel, we hope that you use that PLPG tool to find providers for high quality professional learning that best meet your needs of your school and your district. That match and fit and shared values, how you work, how you use data to improve is so very important. And so you want a good fit and a good match. Rivet has the PLPG to help you find that good fit and match, as well as other resources like questions that you can use to assess the quality of that match, but so that it's a mutual fit between the PL provider and the districts and schools as well. Jocelyn, anything you would add here?
I think we covered it because I also mentioned just the rubric. If you are a school or district personnel, just using the rubric also to assess PL. So I think we've covered everything.
Great, thank you. All right, so what's our next steps in the research plan? We are right now in the middle of looking at establishing what we call inter-rater reliability, or seeking to answer that question of, are rubric results consistent across raters using this new version of the PLPG rubric. And we are going to be shortly here starting after is looking at the strength of the rubric structure. So exactly how do those items within each gateway hang together and within the different types of professional learning that is in Gateway 2 as well. So those are our next steps. And future long-term, we're looking at predictive validity, right, Jocelyn? So does score well in the PLPG? How does that predict outcomes that we're wanting to see? All right, to learn more, and Jocelyn has done a fantastic job at this. She's multitasked as she's talking. I was impressed she was doing this at the same time, but she was dropping in links for you. So you have links there to the PLPG website of Rivets, their rubric. If you're wanting to learn more about implementation, NIRN's website is there for you as well. And then be on the lookout. We have currently a brief and a blog that are in their final stages of production and approval from our funder, to be able to send those out as well. That will summarize the research findings in more detail for you. All right. And with that, Jocelyn and Claire, anything to wrap us up with?
I just want to say thank you so much, Karen, for joining us today, and Jocelyn for co-leading this. We're really grateful for this ongoing partnership. I think it's just so important that we not become complacent with how we're evaluating and how we're thinking about how we add our providers to the professional learning partner guide. So I feel like this partnership is just so important for us to continue to be critical evaluators of how we're structuring the PLPG. And we ask our providers as well to hold themselves to this same level of consistent reflection and accountability for improving and iterating on their services. So your partnership is making that possible. And we really appreciate you digging in and talking about the work that has happened thus far. And we're excited for the next steps of the continued partnership. And then if folks who are on the call have questions, you can see here the contact information for Jocelyn, Mel, who wasn't able to join us today, and Karen are here. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions that arise after the call. Right. Jocelyn, anything else before I let folks go on their way?
I would just say reach out to us if you have any questions about the PLPG, the rubric, anything else diagnostic tool that I mentioned, or any other Rivet services. Feel free to reach out to me. And thank you all so much for attending. And I see some of our providers as well. Thank you all.
All righty. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye.